Welcome to Empire Building. I'm Wendy Papazan, and together with my 4 co-hosts, we bring you weekly unfiltered conversations about leadership, growing a big empire, and living on your own terms.
I'm Kimber Lovett-Mankeedy. We are investors and wealth builders with over $75 million in combined net worth.
I'm Sarah Reynolds. We are visionaries who built more than 50 businesses with over $122 million in annual revenue.
I'm Tiffany Fikes. We've led thousands of people and do it all while being pretty good moms.
And I'm Seychelle Van Poole. We are your podcast to learn how to build big businesses and even bigger lives.
Hi, today on the podcast, you've got Kimber, Tiffany, and Seychelle. We are tanned and just back in town from sunny, or maybe not so sunny, Miami. And it was amazing to share it. We were there for our Her Best Life experience, right? Our flagship event. So we were there with over 200, right? Amazing women, our volunteers, our team. And wow, like what a great place to all be sharing it together and having just a really phenomenal experience for our 5th, really 6th, if you count our virtual year, our 6th flagship event. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have to say, like, coming back from it, I felt like I always come back filled up, but I came back so fulfilled this time. I feel like it was probably one of the best flagship we have done. And we'll share with you some of the things that went into that. But I really feel like it was the best cohesion, operations team, content. Shout out to Tiffany on that. Like, just how it all flowed so beautifully together. I loved every second of it. I didn't have a minute in Miami where I just didn't feel like this is so awesome. And I'm having the best time. And everyone here is just so cohesive and just loving it. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
It was so good. And a lot of you listening may not know it was actually our last flagship experience, the way it looks right now. And so it's really funny to say like, oh my gosh, this was the best, most joy-filled flagship experience. And to know that we're not going to do it like that ever again. And we want to share with you why. Like why that is, because we think it's such a good example in business of, you know, we stand on that stage and we tell women to chase their best life and, you know, realize what brings them joy. And in reality, that was starting to feel really heavy for us as an organization. And we loved the impact and we loved getting to change women's lives. And it was so heavy. It weighed on our organization. It weighed on our emotional states. How we could show up to it was different.
The pressure we felt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because it's really a year in the making. Like I think we come out of those 48 hours, 72 hours, and we are filled with joy. Like there are so many moments of joy. And it's a year in the making, right? We signed the contract for the new location before the event. Like, right, we'd signed that Miami contract. Yeah, years ago, we were on the hook. We have to make big decisions without like a perspective on what was happening to the market, big investment decisions. So I think it was interesting, right? Because it's like in that moment, wow, right? No question. But that is why we've done it for 6 years in a row, right? And you're like, I mean, just even at our time that it takes leading up to that to get there from the board, the founders, the staff, it was the lift, right? That you're talking about, Tiffany.
Yeah. When we found ourselves really focusing on like you're right, in the 72 hours, you know, even the week before, right? Like in that whole week of leading up to, before and after the event, it's one of like the highlights of all of our year. But you're right, it was the stress we were feeling with, you know, $10,000 coffee breaks and room blocks that whether or not you sell out the hotel, you're on the hook for all of those rooms and venue expenses and food and beverage. And like, it became for us so much of the pressure and the stress of financially having to make it work instead of this event and company that was bred out of love and joy and fulfillment and inspiration that we all had experienced because of our relationship together and getting to take that to more people. And so we were really feeling for, you know, 99% of the year, the stress of the venue and not the 1% week of extreme amount of joy and impact for this event that was weighing on us for the rest of the year. And so it was like, we'd get done with this event and have to start selling again for next year. And that felt really heavy.
Yeah. Well, and we sort of realized we were doing things this way because we'd always done it this way.
Yeah.
And that may be you as a listener, like, I was so proud of us for kind of like emptying everything on the table and being like, all right, we believe in this mission still. We may need to reevaluate how we state it, but we believe in the women that are being impacted. How can we do this in our joy for them the way they need to, and just the steps that we took to kind of reevaluate everything so that we could live out our values, so that we could be chasing our joy
authentically
and creating the impact. Yeah, authentically. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is to help walk you through the steps we took so that if you find yourself at some point in your life, you will find yourself at a place where you're like, am I just doing this because I always have? Or is this still the best way, the most joyful way, the most profitable way to have the impact and create the world that I want to have?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's such a good moment to pause. I think sometimes if you're in business with other people, a lot of times you're doing it for the people. And so you need somebody, either a business event has happened that allows people to ask a different question, or maybe sometimes you're the person that says, hey, do we need to reevaluate this? And that often opens the door. And in our case, right, the door is opened. And literally we said, you know what, this is too big of a conversation to have just like on a quick Zoom on a Friday afternoon. So the majority of us like got on airplanes, flew to Austin, got in the same place, and then really said, hey, you know what? As business owners and partners, we actually have choices, right? Like we have choices. And so we put it all on the table and said like, all right, let's just put out all the choices. Like, let's just put everything out, right? And so one is like, you could just walk away. You could say, hey, we've had a good run. We've had about 1,000 women, more than 1,000 women, right, who've touched the company in some way over this period of time. You could say like, it was a season, right? So you could say, we're going to just walk away from it. You could just say, hey, we paused, we looked at it, we're going to keep pushing through. Yeah, it's been hard. Things are supposed to be hard. Maybe we're just missing an ingredient. So let's reevaluate how we were doing it, but let's push forward. Or we said, you know what, we could just put everything on the table and let's reassess, rediscover, like really connect back to the why. Why are we doing this? What's important to it? Because we started to add in all sorts of things. We had different product offerings. We had different content we were creating. Like lots of stuff had started to spin off of it. And so we said, let's just put it all on the table. And everything, like we call them sacred cows, right? Nothing that couldn't be talked about that we could really say, all right, let's have the conversation and really rediscover what we want to do.
I love that. Well, we really, once we kind of evaluated like what our options were, I think all of us really felt unanimously, we're not ready to quit. We're not ready to
We're not done.
We're not done. Our impact is not done. Like we have a fire in all of our bellies to keep impacting more people. And then we looked at the second option to say, well, are we going to keep doing what we're doing? And we said, I don't feel like what we're doing is bringing us the joy that we felt when we first started this. And we feel like we have so many things going on. Are we doing any of them at the highest level we could possibly do it? And so we said, I don't feel like that's the option. So let's go to number 3, which is let's put it all back on the table and let's sit down today and really map out and re-author a future roadmap for what we want this organization to look like. And we've committed to this big event next September because we did this in December. And so it's been almost a year in the making. We've committed to it. We're going to make that event the best one we have ever freaking had. And it was, including Brianna Wiest joining us. I have pages of notes, which I still need to send you, Kimber. I will send them to you because she got to interview her and did an incredible job. But it was the best flagship we've ever had because we were so intentional about making it that and focusing on that. And we knew in the background that we were going to be pivoting to something different. So I'm excited for us to walk through kind of how we did that today.
Yeah, we're just offering our process as a model for you if you find yourself at a crossroads and need help deciding what is best for you and your customer. Because if you're deciding, all right, we're going to move forward, you need to look at what does the customer want and what do I want and how can those marry? It's like those Venn diagrams with the circles that overlap. Like, where do they overlap? Little tiny circles with my hands.
You have tiny hands. There's such little circles.
Where do they overlap? And that's the joy zone of the business. It's what the customer needs and it's what you were created to provide. And so how we started, step 1 was we talked about what we loved about the organization, what we were doing that we loved, what the women were experiencing that we loved. Like, we just started with a big, long list of not just what we love, but like what we're not willing to not be a part of. Beside that, we also wrote out and dealt with the reality of the situation. We dove into the challenges and the stress that we were facing. We kind of looked at how much of our time of our staff is spent in each of these things, and what does that really look like, and what do the budgets look like, and all the different things that we're doing. We started with love and what we're not willing to give up, and then we faced reality on, okay, but what's the climate that we're currently in right now, and what are our challenges?
And I think it's important to note there's a lot of us. And so if it's just you or if it's you and one other person, we started by individually journaling that together, but we set a timer. And because I think sometimes when you just start talking, then you're influenced maybe by somebody else's perspective. So the first thing we did was we actually said, hey, what are these centering questions? And you could do that before you got together or while you're together. And then we wrote it individually and each shared what was the love, so that it was an opportunity for us to like reflect personally first and then collaborate and look for those overlaps.
Well, and we also required every voice to speak on every item, because you very often in a situation where there are multiple people, the louder voices get heard, and the people who are like, well, that was kind of like what I said, and then you miss out on that nuance of that person. And so I love that, Kimber, a good point. We journaled individually, and then we ran around, and no one else could comment on anything until we heard from all the voices, which was crucial.
It was really powerful because even coming into today, like part of the reason why we made different decisions, it was interesting right before we started recording, Tiffany was like, well, I wanted to do it because of this reason. And I was like, no, I wanted to do it because of this reason. And so even just walking into today, like some of the decisions we made, we had such different perspectives. Still, we all reached the same common goal. And we had such different perspectives walking in. And I'm so thankful that we took the time to be quiet and still and actively listen when the other people were talking so that you could really receive their perspective, because it played a huge part in where we wanted to go. One of the pieces that I was passionate, I've been treasurer this past couple of years. And so our operations director, her name is Angela, she's freaking awesome, helped me come to the meeting with a lot of stats and numbers and reports for us to be able to not only make emotional decisions, but also to be able to make logic-based decisions. And so some of the things that we looked at when we came into this session was, how much is the cost per person for these events? Like, what are we on the hook for? If nothing changes, what does our cash flow look like? And then a really crucial one that she and I thought about it like 2 days before the event, that she went back and scrambled to make happen was, what percentage of our staff's time is being spent on this large event? So we could, as we were evaluating our joy zone and what our customer wanted and all of these pieces, we could mirror that with what do the numbers and the profit and loss statements say for how much of our bandwidth and our expenses and our profit are being in this event too. So I think that was helpful walking in with that.
Absolutely. Like the numbers have to be there, right? In terms of understanding that. So it informs.
Numbers don't lie.
They don't lie, right? What informs your decision. Angela, on the other side of that, was able to produce our feedback, right? From the women, those that had actually engaged, participated, been at an event, been in one of our verticals. We do a lot of surveying and evaluations and ask for feedback. And so having really tactical data about what was the client voice telling us, and not just anecdotally, because I think, right, some of you hear one thing and it kind of dominates, but what did the actual survey data over the last 5 years tell us? That the women who attended our events loved, the things that they felt like were missing, or the things that they wished they saw more of. And so we had that number data, we had the feedback from our client-based data, and so we were walking into the room really informed on the financials and the most important, which is the voice of our clients.
Yeah, and she even went in too to see how many times did specific words show up in surveys, as far as whether it was impact or holistic or financial or specific words too. She did a word diagram of how many times did certain words in the surveys even come up, so that we could see what the dominant pieces of feedback were in there too, which I thought was just really brilliant on her part and interesting because it was a visual representation of it too.
Well, and the one thing that is really interesting is we actually created this whole organization. We thought the event was the organization. That's all that we were when we initially envisioned this. And so that's the part of this. And it was actually Sarah who said, this thing that we said was our whole organization, that like it was our whole vision when we first started. What if we didn't do that? And like that was a terrifying thought. Like that's what we had created. This is what we were coming to do and bring to the world. And just recognizing that what got you here may not get you there. And as we looked at what are we doing, and creating the event was a joy for me. However, it eventually got to be a burden, the joy part, because it was like every time a activity was great and women were like, this changed my life, it was all this additional pressure for, I've got to do that again next year. Yeah, but it can't be the same. I've got to recreate life change every year. And so I just want to give anybody listening like permission around that. Like a thing that brought you joy yesterday could be the thing that's holding you back. And if you're not brave enough to ask that question, like, hey, this thing you totally set out to do and it was your whole business when you started, what if we didn't do that? And, like ask that question.
Yeah. And I think we put it all out there, right? Put the event out there, which, we had started to build a lot of things on top of the event, right? Over the 5-year period. And which was also creating lots of distractions, right? We're going in lots of different directions. So putting everything, including that, and literally that bravery, then allowed us to say, well, what about our mission?
Yes.
Are we in service to our mission? And that I think really stopped a lot of us because we were in love with that mission, right? Our original mission was because we originally were Amplify, which we couldn't get the trademark for. So, but I think Amplify is still such a word that brings evokes such emotion for me. It's a word, right? So it was to amplify the lives and voices of women in business around the world. It was this big, right, audacious goal. How could we impact as many women as possible around the world? Just touch as many of them as possible. And I think when we said, well, let's talk about the things let's go back to that first question. What did we love about what we were doing? And the words that started to come out, right? It was depth, impact, transformation. It was this go deep and not necessarily wide, that when we got to see, literally the lives that were being completely transformed. It wasn't about just touching every single woman as far, just that they had liked our page. That all of a sudden this metric of 100,000 women know who we are. But it was actually well, what if it was only 1,000? But literally their lives were changed forever. And because their lives were changed forever, they got to change all the lives that they touched. And so you were reaching that same number, but you were doing it through this critical depth of impact. Anyway, so it just allowed us to completely spend a lot of the time rewriting, reconnecting. And even in that moment, it wasn't we had to walk out of that room with a perfectly buttoned up mission statement. We actually walked out of the room not with it. We walked out of one that we felt we're going to date this one for a little while. Even before we told anybody, we were we're all just going to date it. Let's see how we feel. Let's see what the words invoke for us. And it allowed us to get to the place where we completely reauthored our mission statement.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
I feel we should tell them what our new mission statement is.
Yeah. And it is, our mission now is to create an authentic, supportive community for female leaders that fuels for transformative growth, right? So it's not to amplify the voices and lives of women all over the world. It's to create this authentic, supportive community that transforms them. And that connection empowers her to chase her joy, build her empire, and gives her permission to live her best life. And that for us, it's a longer mission to memorize. I will tell you that. So we've all had to memorize it as a longer mission. But I think if we read it, we can look up at the things we're doing now and match it to our mission much easier to say, is this in alignment or not? And how do we know? We can go back to the mission and say, this is or this is not. And that's really cool.
Well, I don't think that the level of specificity also in this mission and yet opportunity to kind of take it everywhere, we didn't even know that, right? We just knew we had this transformational experience and we wanted to bring it to more women. And when we started to look at the components of it, this mission really captures something that 5 years ago, I don't even know that any of us could have imagined that this is what it would have looked like. And yet today, when I hear that, I still get chills because I know it is so connected to what we've done and what we all want to continue to do more of.
Yeah. I think it would be cool to kind of talk about, we talked about not doing the flagship event, which is our big thing that we originally started with. But I would love to, when you say no to something, it allows you to say yes to other things. So I would love for us to dive into some of the things that we're actually getting to say yes to, because we said no to continuing the big event, because whenever you say no to something, it allows you to say yes to something else.
And we lived so clearly that you say no to a good thing. Like sometimes you say no to a really powerful, amazing thing. Yes, so that you can say yes to great. It's that good to great. You say no to something that's very, very good, to say yes to the great. Yes.
To say hell yes, right? And that was what Brianna, like, I thought Brianna Wiest outstanding. And one of the things I think that all the women walked away with was like, as women too, connecting to the yes, like at your gut level, like not at your head level, not at your heart level, but like deep in the inside, the things that are like just hell yeses for you. And I think as women, we become so conditioned to provide for everyone else that we lose that connectivity at its most basic level, right? So do I want chocolate or vanilla? Like, what's the yes for you? And I think what it allowed us to do in that moment was to be really clear about the hell yes for us. And that was around Empire Circle, right? We were like, these 2 days, we leave so filled up. And it was powerful to have women come back and literally stand up at the event this time and say, you saved my life. Because my commitment walking out of this event was that I was going to go to the doctor. I went to the doctor. I had a tumor. I had an 11-inch tumor in my stomach that I would have not even gotten checked out had I not come to your event last year. So like that is powerful. But we saw was that there were some women who were like, I need a little bit more. I want to be connected throughout the year. I want to be part of this community. We were hearing those anecdotal things from after event number 1, but like being able to say, like, how can I connect at a deeper level? And so that was the birth of Empire Circle several years ago that allowed us to take a smaller cohort, really get into an acceleration around business and life, right? To get into a consultative relationship, accelerate their growth in business and life. And that was where every single one of us, I think, had the biggest joy, where it was like so clear that that is what impacting their lives. We were seeing change, whether it was 1 year or we were really seeing was the power of that long term, 3, 4, 5 years, right? But we watched it just transform us and transform the women who came along that journey with us.
I love that. Well, and Kimber, you said it from the stage this time at the flagship, and I think it really resonated with me, which is you come to the flagship event and in 2 days, there's an impact, no question. You go and you take action, and you've lit a little tiny candle, but if you want to make a bonfire of change, right, that takes time. And, I look at our circle. You've been in our circle, Kimber, for 8 years. I've been in here, I can measure it against Quinn's age because she's 10. So I first started coming when she was like a little tiny baby. So, for 10 years, we've been getting together, and I see how I am a different person, how I am a different parent, how I am a different business leader, how I am a different wealth builder. I show up a different wife, like a different daughter. Like I show up in every area of my life so differently because of the impact that you all have had on me. And if I had just come to that one retreat, it would have impacted me, no question, but it wouldn't have transformed the way I view the world and myself, honestly, in the way that it has. And that really was the gift that Empire Circle has given us, was we saw the impact of lasting change by leaning in over and over and over again in what we've experienced. And so being able to gift that to people who also are wanting to dig in and say hell yes and go deep on themselves has allowed us to really have the bandwidth and the energy and the time to be able to do that on a deeper level, which is really so awesome. I'm so excited about that.
Yeah. So just because you're on your current path doesn't mean you have to stay on that one. It's your business. It's your life. It's your joy. It takes bravery to pivot. Like, we're not saying this was an easy process that we went through. I mean, we're not saying we didn't second guess ourselves at some points. However, I hope that our journey, us sharing our journey through this, we want to leave you encouraged. Just because you're on your current path right now, it doesn't mean you have to stay on that one. It's your business. It's your life. I hope that our story kind of helps you with that, because I will say it does take bravery to pivot and ask hard questions, but we share our stories with you because we want to encourage you to do the same thing. And we want you to know that you gave us the courage to do it too, because we can't stand here every week and on stages and say, you need to chase your joy if we weren't doing it ourselves. So thank you to all of you as well to give us the bravery. But I just want to encourage you that just because you are where you are right now, it doesn't mean you have to continue that way. It doesn't mean that there's not a way to match your happiness with a profitable business.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we were going to close with some words from the magical Brianna Wiest, who we had a chance to spend the entire day with and who I think inspiring us from afar. And it was amazing to just see her just explode that in person and on the stage with our amazing Her Best Life community. So her words that really were an inspiration to us and I think are really fitting for this. Growth can often mean letting go of the person or the business that has kept you safe in order to become the one who can set you free. So if you're interested in learning more about our Empire Circle journey and going deep, finding and chasing your joy in a really powerful community of women that are committed to that growth in not just business, but really holistically in life, then join us. Check it out. You can learn more at herbestlife.com/Empire Circle. You can always reach out to any one of us. We would love to talk to you and we would love to have you be a part of our circle and join us in this journey.
I love that. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is for general informational purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions of the guest represent those of the guest and not KWRI and its affiliates, and should not be construed as financial, economic, legal, tax, or other advice. This podcast is provided without any warranty or guarantee of its accuracy, completeness, timeliness, or results from using the information.